I'm going to introduce my amazing guest today, and the presentation is super, super hot. He's the co-founder and chief data scientist at Trust Insights. Great friend of mine. I can always count on him for knowing everything about what's happening next month in artificial intelligence. We stand on conference room floors, pre-pandemic, obviously, and talk about natural language generation until the wee hours. Chris Penn, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I think that's enough introduction. So let's go into why everybody is actually here, which is talking about natural language processing. For the longest time in marketing, we have had intermediaries between us and our audiences, right? It's pretty straightforward. In the old days, it was really obvious. There was you, and then there was the audience, and then there's somebody like a journalist, an editor, a broadcast specialist, a TV camera, something that stood between you and your audience, and you had to do all sorts of things to work with that intermediary in order to get what you wanted, which is to get to the audience. That probably meant, hanging out at the bar with the journalist and figuring out what their favorite drink was and what their beat was and all the things that they talked about. And for decades, that worked fine. There were 3 TV stations, there was 1 newspaper, there was the local radio station, and life was easy. Then the internet happened, and then in 2007, the most amazing thing happened for marketing that also threw everyone for a loop, which is the mobile phone happened, the smartphone, which basically made the entire world digital. And once that happened, we had an explosion in content. And that explosion in content meant that we have new intermediaries. Today's intermediaries are not the journalist, are not even the social media influencer. Today's intermediaries are the algorithms, the machine learning models that dictate everything you see and everything that stands between you and your audience. And what's astonishing to me is how many people do not go to the same level of effort to get to know the new intermediaries that they did with the old ones. You would spend hours talking to some of these people at the bar, right? You'd have way too many old fashions. You would know the marital history of the person you were talking to and what their kids' names were. But people don't do that. So let's introduce you to a few of them as though we were going to the bar, right? First, our friends at Google have some of the most sophisticated natural language processing algorithms known, period, hands down. In a very recent paper, they were talking about a new TensorFlow learn-to-rank model that takes in a query and does what's called pairwise document comparison within their bidirectional encoding representation for transformers, their BERT framework. Now, if that was just a bunch of words to you, that's okay. Essentially, what they're doing is looking at how you use language. And they talked about this publicly in last fall when they talked about rolling out this BERT model for understanding the context of your queries. But now what they're showing is how it works on the back end. If you've ever been to the eye doctor, and the eye doctor says, puts that big machine in front of your head and says, number 1 or number 2, number 3 or number 4, and you're like, will you please just tell me what glasses I need? That's essentially pairwise comparison as an algorithm. So now what Google is doing is essentially doing the same thing at massive scale. So this intermediary is sitting between you and your content and what the audience is searching for. And it's doing all these comparisons to figure out what's the best fit for the audience. This is a part and parcel of natural language processing. Our friends over at LinkedIn. When LinkedIn shows you stuff in your newsfeed, and you're sitting there going, I'm a marketer. I need to be seen by my audience. They're a B2B audience. I need to be seen on LinkedIn. How do I be seen? Do I show more videos? Do I load video natively? Do I share a YouTube link? And there's a lot of very surface speculation about what works. But if you're willing to do the work and tune into podcasts like, for example, This Week in Machine Learning and AI, LinkedIn's data scientists and AI engineers actually spend hours talking about exactly how it works. Now, you have to be able to decode what it is they're saying, but even in their patents and their patent filings, you can see exactly what they take into account. So if you want to be seen on LinkedIn, for example, they tell you this. You need to your profile, the comments you leave, the posts you make, etc., to have the word representations in your content to match the target audience. But it's not just that. It's also who you're connected with and what they share, and who they're connected with and what they share. So if you're one of those folks who accepts every single possible LinkedIn connection, you may be doing yourself harm in the ability to reach a very specific audience because you've let in like George, the tortilla chip seller. George may be a great guy, and he's probably somebody you do want to hang out with. But if you're trying to get LinkedIn's natural language model to recognize your expertise and the expertise of your friends, George is not going to help you out unless you're marketing tortilla chips.
I think it's a great example, Chris, is that layered approach. It was like the original focused crawlers and the original vertical search engines. They would tier, you go one level out, and then you profile those things and prune out the things that weren't relevant. They'd go another level out. It's less relevant, a lot more to prune. LinkedIn's basically doing that automatically with all the content that you interact with and that your contacts interact with. I think it's a great example of how natural language processing really changes the way that they're able to do the jobs.
Let's move on to YouTube, because YouTube actually, this is a pro tip if there ever was one. Google on their website has a published academic research repository of all of their papers that they sponsor, they publish, they work with. And again, if you can decode what's in there, they published, this is exactly how YouTube's algorithm works. It's a 3-stage set of filters. There's the big everything, then there is a classification, and then there is a ranking algorithm. And what's amazing is that they're looking for a specific type of text, and we'll talk about what this means. They're called bigrams, throughout the title of your video, the description of your video, the tags that you use on YouTube, and the part that every marketer leaves out, the closed captions. If you nail all 4 of those, you stand a much greater chance of being discovered by people searching for those terms, because that's built into the way YouTube's algorithm works. And again, all of this, these are not secrets, right? These are things that these companies have published and said openly, but they've said it in a way that makes it a little obscure. So what we want to do today is demystify a little bit of this. What happens if you don't embrace this? What happens if you stay stuck in 2010 or 2012 or 2015? You get social posts like this, right? You have 1 view on your video, 22 views your feed, and your search rankings are 0. Well, I mean, nobody wants that. So how do you fix this? The answer is why we're here. Natural language processing. What is this? The basic definition that is generally accepted is how to program computers to process and analyze large amounts of natural language data. And that comes from documents, from chat logs, from social media posts, from pages on your website. Anything that's a pile of words is natural language that you can use. We've done natural language projects with things like the lists of ingredients on the boxes of products. We've done stuff with complaints from the customer service inbox. Had a really awful one. The employee reviews on Glassdoor. That was a fun client project. But all of it is natural language and our ability to get machines to recognize it. And this stuff is old. If you have not watched the movie The Imitation Game, Benedict Cumberbatch portrays the scientist Alan Turing, who is famously known for the Turing test, the ability for a machine to converse with us and for a human to go, I can't tell the difference if I'm talking to a person or a machine. Turing's work was the very frontier of natural language processing back in the 1940s and 1950s, and a lot of what we're doing today is built on those early works. Now, early on, there were what was called rule-based natural language processing. It sort of really big, if this, then that. But then we came upon statistical natural language processing a few decades later, and that's what we're still using today. Why is this stuff important? Well, as we said, natural language processing is at the heart of so many of these algorithms. Again, when you dig into the patent filings, the academic papers, the conversations on podcasts, you will see explanations exactly how all these algorithms that control our lives work. Every single recommendation engine out there uses natural language processing. If you think that you're seeing stuff on Amazon just by pure chance, you're not. Amazon is comparing a whole bunch of things, including people who paid them a little more money to feature their products. But
not talking about that today.
But all of this is part of this technology. So LinkedIn explains very clearly, here's how we judge your profile. Google, here's how we do the pairwise ranking models with natural language processing. They say bigrams and trigrams. So in natural language processing, a unigram is a single word. A bigram would be a combined word. So, for example, like a desktop computer would be a bigram, a logical concept that fits in 2 words. And then a trigram would be a logical concept that fits in 3 words, like natural language processing. These combinations of words help computers to understand and disassemble language. So let's briefly take a look at how this works. There's 3 major tasks that computers do in natural language processing: recognition, understanding, and generation. And we'll take apart recognition first because it's where, for most people, you're going to start your natural language processing journey. You're going to have a bunch of data, and you want the computer to start to recognize what's in the box, right? What's in the stuff. So let's take a pile of text here. I realize now I've just rickrolled an entire room full of people, which is awesome. I should have put the video in, but whatever. Computers can't read. Computers cannot process text in the way that you and I can, because even though it's called natural language processing, they don't read languages. What computers do is read numbers and calculate differences between those numbers. So if you were to take these lyrics and you were to substitute every word for a unique number, it would look something like this, right? The word never is represented by the number 1. You can see it starts at the beginning of every line in this lyric. Gonna is number 2. And we've essentially reduced this song to a pile of numbers. From here, we can now start to perform mathematical operations on this text. When you look, for example, what number appears closest to the number 1 in this corpus, if you will? The number 2, right? Never gonna give you up. And now that you can start to do those mathematical comparisons, you can start to see what are the frequencies, how often does something appear, and even start to make predictions. Okay, if the number 1 appears from this, what is the probability that the next number is going to be 2? In this case, the probability is 100%. Think about this, though, when it comes to large amounts of data, just pouring data in. So like all of Wikipedia, all of the customer complaints you have, all of Twitter. You can train extremely large models breaking these things down and then look at the relationships between words. So that's at the heart what natural language processing is. It's turning words into math and then performing a lot of mathematical operations, mostly statistical, to predict, to understand, to decompose a piece of text. You've had experience with this already. If you've ever used a word cloud generator, you are essentially using one of the most primitive forms of natural language processing. Let's just count the number of times a word appears and make the word bigger the more times it appears. And if you've done this social media tools do this for their monitoring stuff, you've had experience with this. So if you've ever wondered, have I actually done natural language processing, and you've made a word cloud for fun, you have. More modern measures have appeared over the decades. There are things such as term frequency and inverse document frequency formats, which essentially try to take out the most common words that don't really lend any meaning to an analysis. Like the word "the" doesn't really tell us a whole lot. So these algorithms helped us to remove these and to start grouping and clustering terms together to better understand what's being said or what's being written in a corpus of text. And then at the more sophisticated levels, you start to see semantic relationships. So you may not necessarily see the word golden retriever appear in copy, but if you have a yellow-colored dog, and there's enough training data, a tool like MarketMuse, for example, that does a lot of extensive semantic analysis on the back end will say, hey, you're talking about yellow-colored dogs. You might want to put golden retriever or yellow Labrador in your text, even if you didn't initially say those words. Did you want to add anything to that, Jeff, on the way you guys do semantic clustering?
No, I think the coolest part about what you said already is that you're walking through the evolution of this thing, and it's like what is good enough now, and doing something like term frequency or density isn't good enough now. That's the key. You've got to examine so much text. You've got to examine everything that's out there on the topic. and then apply it to what you're doing for it to work. You can get by, but it's not going to be there in a really competitive zone.
I will debate you on that maybe towards the end. I believe that there are these different tools, and it's the difference between, say, like a spatula and a shovel and a backhoe, right? Different tasks require different levels of tools. But certainly, if you need to dig a really big hole and you have a spatula, you're going to have a bad time.
I love the example, and I think probably some of the things you're talking about, if you've got a massive amount of data from a social network, and you just want to know kind of what's happening for like to just really understand that data quickly, yeah, there are definitely reasons to do that. If you're going to then turn that into $1 million investment for your business and your content strategy or your long-term social strategy, probably want to take a bigger shovel to the party.
Exactly. We're going to need a bigger boat. So the second category is beginning to understand language. And this is where those relationships really come into play. Just because a word appears a lot, or just because a word seems to be important within the context of a document, does not necessarily mean that you can gain any kind of understanding from it. It's the same as if you had a refrigerator full of stuff. All foods in there are not the same, right? Some things are breakfast foods. Some things are lunch foods. Some things are snack foods. Some things are things you're desperately trying to hide from your children or your dog. And they group together. And understanding, the power of understanding these techniques around clustering helps us to figure out what things go together so that we can make better content from them. You would not, I hope, just start pulling the most frequent ingredients out of your refrigerator and just mashing them together and turning it into a dish. That's not going to work out so well. Like, you grab the anchovies, you grab the 4 cans of tuna you had in there, and you grab some pickles, and you grab the ice cream. Not a great choice. But if you were to cluster and start understanding, like, this is a breakfast dish. Okay, so let's pull out the eggs. Let's pull out the bacon. Let's pull out the bread. Okay, these are logical groups of foods to have together. And just in the same way with natural language processing, once you've essentially broken up the text into all those numbers, a process called tokenization, now you start to go, okay, what do these things have to do with each other, and how can we make them make logical sense so that we can use not just a word, but a concept. One of the things that happens in Google's algorithm especially is that semantic understanding. That's what's in their BERT model, bidirectional encoding representations for transformers, is not just words and phrases, but relationships. So if I have a website, for example, and let's say it's a coffee shop, and I put up all these espressos and macchiatos and mochas and lattes, and somebody types in the word iced coffee, right? But I don't have iced coffee on my website. Semantically, there's enough there for Google to go, you appear to be a coffee shop. Most coffee shops serve these things. Maybe you have iced coffee. So if someone's searching for iced coffee near me, my coffee shop might show up in the rankings, even if I don't use those exact words, because of these topic clusters. And again, inside of the Market Muse tool, for example, you could type in the term you're looking for and see stuff that does not appear. Like, for example, I typed in content marketing. Third down from the list is social media. Nowhere in the word content marketing does the word social media appear, but it is because of these logical groupings of text that appear together that makes you go, this co-locates an awful lot. Let's make sure that that's in there.
Yeah, I think that I love the example of the coffee shop, because imagine you walked into a coffee shop and you ordered something that was, in your mind, obvious. Let's say you walked in and you said, hey, can I have a double espresso? And the person at the counter looked at you like you had 8 eyes and had no idea what you're talking about. So you aren't exhibiting the signals that you are a really great coffee shop. Your content out there is the same thing. If you're writing about content marketing strategy and you never cover buyer personas, you never talk about brand awareness, well, are you truly representing that which a subject matter expert would represent with your content? And that's the core of what we do. And that's the core of what Chris does with his amazing processes. It's to say, let's make sure we don't have any blind spots. But the blind spots sometimes are only things that subject matter experts would know. Other times, they're going to be obvious, but maybe your writer only had a stack of keywords delivered to them. They didn't they weren't encouraged to do subject matter expert level research. So all of those things lead to the situation where you ask for a macchiato and the barista says, I have no idea what you're talking about. Didn't you just want a cup of coffee? And you're like, this is not the place for me.
And this technology, this technique extends way beyond SEO, way beyond even social media, way beyond general marketing. If you are trying to develop an understanding, which is the point of this section of natural language processing, you want to understand something and understand what the major issues are. This is a great way, a great set of technologies to use to get educated. Suppose, for example, you want to look up like racial injustice and get your head around the entire topic. What are the things, the data points that you would need to start investigating to build an understanding of this? So these tools and these technologies have applications for any form of communication, any form of transmitting knowledge from one person to another. Which brings us to the last section, which is generation, the generation of content. And this is going to be either the golden goose or the grand nightmare, one of the two, depending on how marketers overall roll it out. Natural language generation is the logical conclusion to the process of natural language processing because it takes that last step. We have the analysis, we have the mathematical understanding, and now we have prediction. What is likely to come next in a word, in a sentence, in a document? So it can be something as simple as just answering questions, like what are the logical questions in content marketing that you would need to answer? This is where a machine is giving you sentence-level predictions, and then you, as the marketer, have to create those answers, presumably with some level of subject matter expertise. You can kick that up a level by having machines start to design the outline. So maybe you have somebody on staff who is not a subject matter expert. That's okay. You can hand them these things called briefs that essentially outline, this is what you're going to write about, and these are the terms you're going to use, and these are the headings and things, so that you can write something that sounds like you have expertise, even if you have no idea what you're doing, but you're a competent writer. And these are tools that are commercially available right now. This is all in the MarketMuse system. These are available to everybody today to just pick up and run with. If you want to get fancy, there are now tools based on these models called transformers that essentially are like autocomplete, but they're autocomplete not at the word level, but at the sentence level or even the paragraph level, where you can, this is one called Distill GPT-2. This is based on a model by a group called Otter.ai, and it has ingested 2 trillion hyperparameters. It's the largest model that they have, and is essentially able to guess at the sentence level what the next likely logical sentence you're going to type is. So in this case, I started the prompt with how to program computers to the definition of natural language processing, and then I hit tab, and it started to write for me. It says, you'll learn about techniques and tools that computer systems use to do data processing, parsing, and analysis, as well as techniques for generating and manipulating machine-readable text. I didn't write any of those blue parts. None of them. I just hit the tab button, and it auto-completed sentences for me based on its large model. And in your industry, your niche, you can take existing papers, white papers, blog posts, emails, webinar transcripts, feed it in and do what's called a fine-tuning of the model to say, I want these words to have more prominence because we're going to use them more. So if you were writing, for example, Disney movies, you would load in all the scripts from like Tangled and Frozen and Maleficent and all these things, and it would tune the model towards those types of formats. People have done some really entertaining things with like the Harry Potter series, loading all 8 Harry Potter books into a model, then having the machine attempt to write its own Harry Potter book. Sometimes the results are a little iffy. There was one variation where it ended up with Hermione eating, killing and eating Harry. But, these things happen. And then at the highest level, you have machines not drawing on solely from existing patterns. This type of generation is mostly extractive, meaning that it's taking from frequently occurring things. The models that are available now, this is one from Hugging Face, which is based, this one is, which model is this? This is Facebook's BART model, which is a combination of BERT and an autoencoder that takes basically 2 of the top performing models and mashes them together. I fed it an article from the BBC News from yesterday morning about dexamethasone. And I said, take this whole thing and summarize it for me in 3 sentences. And it did its little churning, and spit out, dexamethasone has been shown to cut the risk of death by a third. The drug is already used to treat rheumatoid arthritis and other conditions. The UK government has announced it will make the drug available to all patients. When you read the original article from the BBC, those sentences do not occur in the article. Right, so in this case, the BART model is doing what's called abstractive summarization. It is writing net new content. Now imagine somebody put the latest, say, stock market report from your your earnings calls, or somebody put a new academic paper from your field in, and you wanted to write a blog post using an abstractive model. You could take that 1,000-word post, distill it down to 5 or 6 sentences that nails the essence of it, and then allows you to riff on it from there. Or heck, you just do that a bunch of times, and you got the thing written for you. So this is sort of the end state for now of where we can go with natural language generation, being able to have machines write net new things that never been written before, but are intelligible, are logical, are correct, and this is available. So I did this in Google's Colab environment. So this is not like, buying $1 million worth of machinery and stuff. This is using freely available public resources to do this sort of thing. And this took, I think, about 8 minutes from getting the environment set up to getting the first run. So not a super heavy lift as long as you know what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that, and obviously, and a lot of them are going to be in the AMA asking questions. And shortly, my data science team, who have built MarketMuse first NLG first, it's called NLG first draft or MarketMuse first draft. And we've looked at some of the flaws in these models. So a lot of them, they'll fall into repetition. A lot of them, they will, repeat even the same word or the same sentence over and over again when they lose sight or they lose structure. And very few of these are tuned to meet specifications like that which a content marketer would receive, or like that which we build with our content briefs. So what we've been able to build, and we'll be releasing it in the next month or months, is the ability to generate drafts quality content to deliver against particular specs. But that's another example where the innovation in this field is going to drive into specific use cases. You saw it early on when people were just doing financial documents. Washington Post, when they launched Heliograph, they were so pumped because they could cover every election, every Olympic event, but they were very templated. Now we're talking about open text, answering questions, really giving you a logical representation of what a narrative might be like, and that's only going to get better.
Yep. This started about late 2018 is when we start to see some massive advances in natural language processing. And now there are probably a good 12 or 13 models out there, like Facebook's BART, Google's BERT, XLNet, and a variety of others that are generating state-of-the-art results that, frankly, up until those models, as you were saying, Jeff, a lot of what the previous generation models would generate was, on a good day, mediocre, right? On a good day, it was okay. Which, to be perfectly fair, given some of the content I've seen some marketing put out, they would be an improvement over that. Now we are at the point where I think content marketers either need to substantially level up their skills or start partnering with machines, because the machines will create a better than mediocre first draft, and then it's up to us to add the final polish. Now, it's important to say at this point that, if you're like, well, should I be updating my LinkedIn resume, my LinkedIn profile now or tomorrow? The technologies that are available are still relatively inaccessible, meaning that, yes, if you're a MarketMuse customer, you're going to get access to a lot of this stuff. But for the average person, the average content marketer, this stuff is still mostly science fiction. And that's okay. But that's going to keep changing as these models get better and better over time. They get cheaper to use. The hardware we run them on gets faster and faster. I just got a laptop for my older kid about 6 months ago, and it has one of the fastest NVIDIA GPUs in this thing. They plug their laptop in, and the electric meter just starts spinning. that machine can run state-of-the-art models like this natively without a cloud interface at all. And to think that a kid's gaming laptop that they're going to go play like Call of Duty or something on it can run these transformer models and do it at home is a testament to just how fast this technology is moving. So on
Chris,
that,
I got a couple inline questions for us. One is, which solution was used for the dexamethasone example, and can it be used easily to do something similar?
This is Facebook's BART model that was used, and Hugging Face has a lot of these in their Transformers kit within Python. So this is all being done in Python. And can it be something similar? Yes.
Yeah, they asked about our library. Our library is currently proprietary right now. Stay tuned. Could you give examples of the Google Colab you used to generate the summary? And can you also generate longer versions with that solution?
Good question. I'm actually trying to figure that out myself because I've run into some tokenization limits. I tried to load, what did I try to load? Oh, I tried to load a 1.4 million word book into it, and it said no bueno.
So. There's some limitations in some of the APIs too. So yeah, maybe we could dive into that if you want to give us both emails. We can dive in and show you where those limits are. So.
Yep. Again, in Colab, this is like literally 6 lines of code. It's you load the Transformers library, you import the summarization function, you give it the text you want, and then you say run the summarize, and you set your parameters, and it spits out the thing. Even I, as an incompetent Python programmer, because I don't do Python, I'm mostly an R programmer, couldn't stand this up and run it. So at least for a proof of concept, you can get it up and running sooner rather than later. Okay, on that note, so let's talk about how to get started with this stuff. Number one, before we talk about any tools, we need to talk about your data. Specifically, do you have any? And what condition is it in? Because all machine learning is based on the existing data that you feed to an algorithm. Now, a lot of the models that we're talking about, like Facebook BART and Google BERT and stuff, come with pre-trained models, massive pre-trained models that you tune up. But for the most part, you start with. But you still need to provide the tuning library. So if you've got customer service emails everywhere and they're not in any kind of structured format that these tools can ingest, you still need to do that. If you are pulling in social media data and it's in 15 languages, and a lot of models still struggle with different languages, as fair warning, for good or ill, a lot of models are tuned on like the ASCII character set. So there you'll have to look. Facebook's BERT and BART. Facebook has, for everything that company does wrong from an ethics perspective, their technology perspectives are fantastic, and they provide their models in like 27 or 28 different languages. So if you're going to use a toolkit, those would be the ones I would say to take a look at. But where is your data? And what condition is it? Is it clean? Is it usable? Is it complete? Does it answer the questions that you want it to answer? Was it collected in a way that is unbiased? Real simple way to go completely off the rails and get yourself into a whole bunch of hot water would be to feed any of these models biased data. I have seen this happen in some really egregious ways where you only take data from certain customers, and those customers naturally happen to be, for example, a certain race or certain gender. You have to have all those safeguards in you, the human, because the machines don't know how to differentiate. The machines will say, "You give me stuff, I'm going to spit stuff back out to you," and it has no idea. I was at a trade show, the Martech show, a little while ago, and I was watching this one display of an analysis of all ideal customers for Dunkin' Donuts coffee. And they were just using Dunkin' as an example. I don't think it was Dunkin' was a customer. And it showed the city of Boston, and red dots for where your ideal customers are, black dots for non. And the whole section of Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan, all black dots, no customers there. I'm like, and that section of the city is all Black Americans. And I'm like, are you telling me that there's not a single Black American in those regions that doesn't buy your coffee? You are full of it. Your model is broken. You have a bias in there. When we train natural language processing, we have to be aware of those exact same biases. Are we feeding our machines the right things? So that's first and foremost. You have to have good governance, good data, and people who know proactively to look for biases in the data before you feed it to the models.
Yeah, when you send it, let's say you're training a model based on your data corpus, so your content corpus? Well, it's going to write like you. It's going to generate like you. So if you do things not as well as you'd like, maybe you need some auxiliary data to bring in. The same would go, and as an exhibition of that, and the way that I like to flip it is, I can write the exact same content item. They trained on two different models. One maybe from a 19th century English author, and then two based on the Washington Post. They will never ever write anything remotely similar.
Mm-hmm.
It just happened. So you think about the applications in content marketing, think about the applications and making sure you've got a great corpus to start with, or maybe making sure you've assembled a great corpus to train on. That's what Chris is talking about.
You raise a really important point there. Let's say you are trying to write content to appeal to, say, Black Americans, right? And then you look at your staff, and there isn't a single one on staff. What content are you going to train this thing with that's going to resonate with the target audience? It's not going to. So you have to fix diversity and inclusion at the human level first before the machines will not do it for you. The machines, it's garbage in, garbage out. So just be very, very cognizant of that.
Awesome example. Persona, it's almost taking your content strategy and turning it into something that has to be persona driven. It has to be customer driven. It has to be ABM. You're going to have to look at those other channels that those audiences read and maybe emulate those, or maybe use them to train.
Yep. Or, hey, hire them.
Well, I didn't want to go there, but yes, if you haven't done that already, take that step.
On the topic of buy or build, there's three considerations when it comes to buy or build. There's time, there's money, and then there's strategy. When it comes to buying and building, if you have time and you don't have money, you're probably going to build it, right? When you have money and you don't have time, you're probably going to buy it. But core to it all is your strategy. If your content marketing is going to be a core competency of your organization, you probably should build it, because you don't want your secret sauce to be, in the hands of a vendor that you may or may not have an ongoing partnership with, or they may end up doing something else. But for most content marketers, unfortunately, content marketing is not a core competency of most organizations. It's an ancillary thing. Like if you are a coffee shop, your core competency is selling coffee, not content marketing. And in those instances, it makes total sense to just go and buy something instead of trying to build your own. So who do you buy from? Well, go buy something from MarketMuse. That was easy. If you're going to build, the two languages that you're going to be looking at most are going to be R or Python. These are the two most commonly used languages in data science and AI in general, and in natural language processing in particular. And the choice is largely one of comfort based on your developers or your own development skills, which language you like better. I personally am old. I grew up in languages like C and Java, and so R is a very familiar, friendly, feels good language to write in. I don't like writing Python. I don't like the whole stupid tabs and tabbing in for your procedures. But there are an awful lot of people, my kids included, who love Python. They find it intuitive. They find it easy to work with. I'm like, I don't know what you're writing. I can't read your code. But either one is going to be functional. And then you're probably going to be wanting to build inside of some kind of environment that is cloud-based, so that like if your laptop decides to die, it's not the end of the world. The environments that I work in most are Google's Colab, because they have incredibly insane GPUs that are available essentially for free in 4-hour increments, and then IBM Watson Studio. If you want a production environment that has the ability to look for bias in data sets and flag, like, hey, there's a problem in here, Watson Studio is really terrific for that. So we have covered an enormous amount of natural language processing in just about 42 minutes. We're going to take some time to do some questions and stuff, but before we do that, a couple of special announcements. One, if you want to ask questions about this and all other forms of content marketing and data science and AI, there's 2 Slack communities you can join. The first is Analytics for Marketers, which is the Trust Insights Slack. Stop on by. We've got about 1,000 people in there just talking analytics, although today was a awful lot of dog pictures. I don't know why. And then join the Content Strategy Collective on Slack, run by MarketMuse, which you can see the URL there as well. Both Slack communities are really valuable. We're going to do the Ask Me Anything in the Content Strategy Collective just after we close at the top of the hour here. And Jeff, you want to talk about the MarketMuse offer?
Oh, absolutely. So Market Muse Pro, which is our solution for smaller teams, freelancers, really giving you a limited view into what we can provide to level up your content creation, content optimization practice, is available right now for free for 3 months. You just have to sign up, plug in a card, and you're in. 3 months of as if you were full paying user of Market Muse Pro. If you have a team, a small team, if you're in a larger site, you can actually put an inquiry in, and we'll set you up with one of our premium offerings, either our bronze, silver, or gold offerings. That's both of our Slack communities. You know, you were joking around about Python versus we're good friends with Hamlet Batista. He comes at it from the search engine optimization world, really focused on Python. We need to organize an R versus Python a Slack battle on there coming soon, and we'll see how that ends up. But definitely check it out. If you haven't logged in, if you don't have a Market Muse Pro account, make it happen. If you are in need of a Market Muse Premium account, easily done. Bottom right, you can click on the help bot, or you can shoot me a note at jeff@marketmuse.com. And thank you so much. And a couple more questions. You good for 2 or 3 more? Yeah, let's do it. And we'll take the rest of them and put them into the AMA. Chris, you're frequently covering social media as a data set. Can you talk through some of those use cases?
So social media, and in the context of natural language processing, is all about understanding the shape of the conversations and what's being said. One of the big cautions I have, and this is something I got from my friend and colleague Tom Webster over at Edison Research, is that social media is horrendous for quantitative assessment, right? You can have a bunch of people who are loud, talking to the air, talking to themselves, retweeting themselves, and it doesn't really give you a good sense of the volume of data, but in understanding the topics, understanding the conversation, and mapping it out, that's where social media really shines. So if you were to take a real simple example, take a hashtag like take like Black Lives Matter, right, and take that all the conversations in, mine it, understand it, map it out. What's being said? What are the major conversation points? That is the starting point for then being able to do more research. So social media is a phenomenal source for doing that qualitative research to understand what questions to ask. I would say that's the best place to use that data. The other thing you can do is you can start to use it to verify trends. So if you see something being talked about, you can then cross-reference a topic from social media with search data and say, okay, yes, people are talking about this. Is anyone searching for it in Google? And if you see, a whole bunch of noise on social, like on Twitter, and there's no search volume on Google, it's like, well, I think it's people just talking to themselves. On the other hand, if you see something there and then you look in Google and see a chart up and to the right, like, okay, that's something that we should be paying attention to. And from there, you can do things like commission surveys, do some market research, focus groups, and then build out your corpus of text and find subject matter experts you can use to offer your own experienced point of view on those topics.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. And I think the first time I was exposed to Trust Insights and to Chris was actually when he profiled what the audience looked like at a conference. So think about it. He almost profiled the Twitter activity and all the information from Twitter around a particular live event. And it really showed you what was happening there online from the live event. And it almost gives you, imagine what that data could give you. That could give you the ability to have an effective content marketing strategy at the next event for that particular audience. The use case of understanding what people are doing, how they're doing it, what they're retweeting, what they're posting about can be taken and said, wow, if I'm going to cover this next year and I don't look at that, I'm shooting in the dark and I don't need to. I can dive in and know who the 10 people I need to get behind my offering are, 6 weeks before the event. And I can actually make that happen versus just jumping in and going, I'm at this session, hashtag Chris Penn. It's even the wrong hashtag. You still see that. You've got all this data there. So I think that's a great use case as well as for virtual events, live events. Don't just hashtag into the wind. You can use back information to understand explicitly what we care about. prey on the egos on social media. What does this person typically retweet? What does this, and he or she is at this event. So many things you can do with this research.
The other thing you can do on that front that is really valuable is decompose someone's media diet. So again, if you take 5 or 6 people who you like, whose Instagram posts you follow or tweets you follow, you can see what publications they share, then mine the data out of those publications and get an understanding of the topics that they care about and the language that they are expecting to see when you do outreach to them.
Wow. This is just becoming how to hack social media by Chris and Jeff. I'll give you one more. If you see somebody who tends to tweet or post on one topic related to their industry, and then they also post on other concepts that might not be directly related to their industry, they made a concerted decision to tell you a little bit about them, their personal value, right? Now, can you connect to that personal value against just connecting to that business value? You're going to have immediate transcendent connection to that person because they chose to publish this personal aspect of their life. Maybe it's a podcast they listen to. Maybe it's the sport they like. Maybe it's I sound so nerdy. Maybe it's the sport that they like to play. Maybe it's the board game they like to play. But no, you get that in your, it's not 2 different topic. It is 2 different topic models, but it can create one concerted content marketing plan. Think critically about that, especially now when there's so many things happening in the world, and you can really, really get a clear picture as to how people think, what their audience is. If you do that at the company level, right? Think all the people at a company, what are their adjacent topics? You think about that and applying it to account-based marketing, applying that to buying team dynamics and buying team-based selling. I mean, there's infinite possibilities there.
Larry Kim has a great expression for this. He's the CEO of Mobile Monkey. It's called the double unicorn strategy. And Larry's double unicorn is this: when you have 2 topics that an audience has, you create content at the intersection of those topics, and you will see astonishing results, particularly on advertising. He showed an example where he figured out there was a political orientation, a liberal political orientation, and a strong overlap with people who like the TV show Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So he made a meme from one of the episodes, a Romulan senator yelling, "This is a fake," and put it out on Facebook and lightly boosted the post. And he said he got hundreds of thousands of engagements within seconds of this because it was the intersection of those 2 interests together. And he said he paid almost nothing because it took off because it was the right intersection of organic content. So again, if you're mining this data, wherever it's from, it can be from publications, it can be from social media, you can put it into action and create unique content will appeal to people because it's so custom. People go, "That's me." Even though the intersection of both audiences is like 500,000 people, to those people, it's like, "That's me. That's written just for me."
Yeah, we speak about it a lot with our content advisory team. We're talking to clients. It's that bridge content. Sometimes the bridge is easy to understand, and it's that there's a clear intersection. Sometimes it's not, and you're too far away. And so in those cases, creating, let's say you're A and C, it's creating the B and building authority on the B so you can connect A to B and B to C. That happens a lot where you've written. I mean, we had a client who wrote about 2 separate B2B technology application categories, right? And there was no intersection. And they were out in left field. They had 1,000 articles over here and about 600 articles over here. And we're like, you can't just start connecting those 2 things. They make no sense. Here's the bridge topics. Go become an expert in those. And guess what? All boats rise. It was a 5x traffic increase to both sides of that funnel and at both sides of that topic model. So these bridge topics, it's not just for, appealing to audiences, but it can also turn into a place that you can, exhibit expertise that you truly understand the audience. It's not just that that they all like the Deep Space Nine. It's that that there's some sort of connection between that and your core business. Imagine going out and saying, "I found this bridge topic that brought all my customers together." Well, that's huge. And that can be done like today very, very quickly. You just take 2 topic models, overlay. Is there an overlay? Yes or no? No overlay? Well, let's figure out and find one where there is. And that's, kind of what LinkedIn is doing, just saying.
Mm-hmm. Next question.
Awesome. Yeah, all right, cool. We have one more, and then we will wrap it into the wrap it into the audience. What positives and negatives do you see with the current models for generation?
So the current models, and Jeff covered this a lot, the current models are only as good as your ability to tune them, and the model size, and really critically, how much feedback and guidance you give them, right? If you take, BERT, for example, even the extra large version of BERT or GPT-2, and you say, just make stuff up, it gets pretty funky. I mean, you'll get some really cool stuff, but it's not necessarily commercially usable because it's not coherent. Because again, there is no intellectual understanding. This is still just predictive math at the end of the day. And so for a model like BERT or GPT-2, you still need to have a lot of guardrails. Some models too, there's a panel of about 7 or 8 tests that everyone tests models on. There's the state-of-the-art tests. And you can actually, if you go to sites like Kaggle.com and stuff, you go to the various data science blogs, Katie Nuggets and stuff, you'll actually see scorecards of each of the different models. So if you are doing recognition tasks, if you're doing tokenization, sentiment analysis, if you are doing generation, if you are doing prediction, question answering, there's all these different tasks, and those models all have their different scores. And just like, you're not going to get one baseball player who is a great pitcher and a great catcher and a great runner. You're going to have different players in different roles. The models are going to perform the exact same thing, where you're going to pick a model based on its performance metrics for the task you're trying to have it do. So you cannot necessarily take something that's a question answering model like ExcelNet and apply it to a generative model like GPT-2. It's just going to go really badly for you. So look at those scorecards. Jeff, when you guys are looking at models that you're incorporating into market, how do you guys do the assessments?
Well, so we're trying to figure out how often they can give us something, and we have 3 phased elements. It's different quality levels. So when we're looking at them, how quickly do they degrade? How frequently do they degrade? Do they need particular inputs? Like, do they need questions? Do they not? Do they need other pros? Do they not? And then the output is kind of level 1, level 2, level 3. We've subjectively come up with those levels. And we'll grade that out. That's frankly, at this point, that's why we decided to build our own, because we didn't have anything that could produce what we call level 2 that we would be willing to pass the Chris Penn dollar test, which is the Chris Penn dollar test is when you say, and we can end on this because I think it's always one of my favorite things. And we talked about it yesterday on the Content Tech State of the Industry, was holding up the dollar and saying the biggest test on content is, would you pay to read it, right? And if we, and because if you pay to buy it, someone better be willing to pay to read it, and that's the key. And that's that's as good of a Turing test as for today as you could take away. So that's really, really awesome. But yeah, that's how we think about things. It's how often does it degrade? Nonsense. Sometimes it's nonsense. You see, it's fun for party games. I think it's the next stage. The next thing you might see at Cards Against Humanity is going to be, doing natural language generations and making people laugh their butts off. But yeah, please join us. Chris, thank you. This is the coolest session. I really loved it. Presentation's amazing. Look for the recording in the next couple of days. Please join the Analytics for Marketers Slack. Go join, if you haven't already, the Content Strategy Collective Slack. That's where the AMA is going to be. Chris, we're going to go jump into there. And thank you again for all of your time and energy and for explaining this for, frankly, anyone at any level. I think you can take something away from this discussion. Thanks again.
Thanks for having us. Take care.
Yeah.
Want help solving your company's data, analytics, and digital marketing problems? Visit trustinsights.ai today and let us know how we can help you.